monthly Q&A. This time I have a special guest with me. He is my friend and he's my partner in the Ultimate Weight Loss Program. And he's really, really good at answering these kind of questions. We will do our best to answer your questions live, but remember the best way to get them asked is to submit them in advance. And we have 33 here. So hopefully you are someone that submitted one of these questions. Welcome, JP. It's good to see you again.
Thank you. Always good to see you and good to be here.
Yep, absolutely. Well, you're very good at answering these questions and I can't wait to start asking them. So the first one is, and I haven't looked at these, so this will be new to me and new to you. I just literally printed this out. The first one is from Amanda. What can I do to help me not eat beyond being comfortably full? I still tend to eat too much of compliant food because it tastes so good. For example, overeating fruit. I try to start with and fill up with the least calorically dense foods, but still want the banana and ice cream, for example. All right.
All right. I'll let you start, AJ.
Oh, boy, you always do that. But okay, so, everybody's different, but I can tell you, Amanda, from the people that I've worked with that have this problem of eating past full, it generally is rooted into a lifetime of some kind of restricting, weighing and measuring, calorie counting. And until one is willing to eat enough starch, you're always going to be seeking more food. And that's what I have found. Also, the other thing I found that as long as your environment has stuff in it, you're going to want it. You're always going to want the most calorically dense foods in the environment. I mean, there's things we can teach you how not to eat that. But again, if your weight is good and then maybe you're not overeating. And I think a lot of people don't realize how voluminous this food is and that we're actually meant to feel full and that our stomach will pooch out. If you've ever seen a raw fooder, they're eating like 14 pounds of food a day and they look like they're pregnant. And our ancestors probably did the same thing. So I think that everyone struggles a little bit with knowing exactly when to stop, and the food is good, but I don't think it's really significant if it's not impacting your life or your health or your weight. So what would you say, JP?
Well, I think also if you look at the Okinawans, who not only do they live some of the longest in the world, but they have the least disability. One of their famous sayings is Hari Hachi Bu, which means to eat to 80% full. And I think it's healthier for you not to be blown out where your stomach, people nowadays, they eat till it hurts. And it's not really healthy for you to do that physically, but it's also not good for you to do it mentally and emotionally. So you should try to leave some reserve where you're not 100% full. And also, as AJ said, which is one of the main things we've been teaching in UWL, this is more of a starch-based program. We're not encouraging you just to only eat vegetables. You need to make sure you get enough starch. And that's imperative that you're getting some sort of something that's very filling, whether it's like oats or beans or potatoes, even if you want to use rice, those are fine. But, oats, potatoes, and beans are some of the most filling food that you can ever get in your diet. So that would be important. And then finally, the last thing, which may, in my opinion, be the most important for what you read, is more mindfulness and serenity and being calm and being happy where you are and not always looking for the next fix. And that's one of the biggest problems that we see today is people are just constantly in our society today. They're overstimulated. I mean, just think about your cell phone, your iPhone, and all the images you see on the screen and on the TV. We're constantly jumping, like it's almost like a frog jumping from lily pad to lily pad to lily pad, never just staying at one place. And we're never just being in the moment and having that relaxation, that meditative state of mind. And that's really critical, that mindfulness.
You know what I found interesting in her question is she says, I try to fill up with the least calorically dense foods first, which is what we call sequencing, which is, something we recommend for people trying to lose weight. But if you're not trying to lose weight, what's going to happen is the least calorically dense foods are going to mechanically fill you up, but they're not going to satiate you. And if you're not satiated from enough calories, from things like starches, you're always, I think, driven to overeat. And I think there's tricks and tips you can learn. Like one of the things, if I was trying to break overeating at night, one of the things I would do is, first of all, don't tell yourself you can't have the banana ice cream, but maybe set a timer for 20 minutes and do something else for 20 minutes. Walk your dog, do the dishes, clean up. And then after 20 minutes has passed, you may or may not want the ice cream because it can take that long for the brain to register for the signals from the stomach that it's full. And what I would do in that time is I'd probably brush my teeth. And my teeth brushing is such an elaborate process between the flossing, the electric toothbrush, the water pick, the retainer, and the rubber bands that once that's in, it's like, I don't want to do that again. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. And the other thing is we've done a lot in UWL and Mastery is I've encouraged people to use essential oils. So a drop of peppermint when you're done, swished in water, and then spit it out. And definitely, if you were to use the clove, you really can't eat after that because your tongue gets numb.
Absolutely. So thank you. All right. Heidi says, I've been wanting to add a teaspoon of flax seed 2 or 3 times a week for more omega-3, but I don't want to gain weight. When I enter my food and chronometer, I'm sometimes low on omega-3. I think I've heard you say that you know other who's added flax seeds and gained weight. In Dr. Greger's How Not to Diet book, he writes flax has been used for folks to lose weight. What do you think in terms of flax seeds and weight issues? Can you take this one first? Would you mind?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because you and I probably have a little bit of a difference on this. Ground flaxseed isn't as high in calories as people think. A teaspoon is about, I think it's around 15 calories and about a gram, maybe a gram and a half of fat. And so it depends how much you're talking about you're wanting to take in. But I think that you were saying that you want it as a source of omega-3s. Now, AJ, you don't use nuts and seeds really, right? And your
Right.
omega-3.
My omega-3s are fine, but I'm eating lots and lots of greens, and I make sure that purslane is in my diet almost every day. It's vertilago, and it's one of the highest. I learned about it from our friend Carrie Saunders.
Yeah, so that's a weed that's one of the highest sources of omega-3s. But the other difference, AJ, is that your omega-6 levels are so low in your diet, where the average person who's eating a lot of nuts and seeds and animal products, their omega-6 is through the roof, plus they use oils. So, I personally, what I do is I buy flaxseed whole, and then I grind it in my blender, and then I store it in my freezer, and then I use between 1 and maybe 3 teaspoons. So that's 3 teaspoons is a tablespoon. I'll use that in if I was to eat oatmeal or if I was to have a smoothie or some sort of food, but I don't use it all the time. So I do use it, I do use it, but I don't use it all the time. It's probably your best sources of omega-3s other than purslane, or if you wanted walnuts. I think it's a lot easier to get addicted to walnuts than it is to ground flaxseed.
Absolutely. And also the amount she's talking about, 1 teaspoon a couple times a week. I can't imagine somebody gaining weight from that. The person that told me that they gained weight from flax, they went from eating no added fat to 2 tablespoons a day. And that was a bigger jump. And also you can do what Dr. Lyle says, run an experiment. Even if you did ostensibly gain weight, it will be negligible. I mean, try it over a month. And I'm pretty sure you're not going to gain weight from a teaspoon, and especially just a few times a week. So.
Well, and also I've said this, AJ, since this program was literally, even before it was created, of course, probably 10, 15 years before it was created. But from the day this program started, I've said, don't weigh yourself. It's not going to serve you any benefit to weigh yourself, because there's only one reason why, is because your scale's not intelligent. It doesn't understand what you're weighing. Are you retaining water? Are you gaining muscle? Are you building bone? Or are you actually losing bone and losing muscle and losing water? And the scale says, wow, you lost 5 pounds. I got news for you. That's the worst 5 pounds you'll ever lose in your life. So unless you're doing some sort of a very accurate, like underwater weighing, or the one that Dr. Carrie Saunders uses, where it's a $3,000 machine, scales are pretty much useless. So I don't recommend weighing yourself. I recommend looking in the mirror, seeing how your clothes fit and how you generally look.
I agree, but that is a very hard habit for our people to break, JP. Would you agree?
Well, how long have you and I been working together? I've been saying it from day one, and it's like 80% of the people don't listen to it. So I know it's hard.
Yep. Thank you. But like I said, I would try an experiment, because even if you did gain weight, which I don't think you would, it's going to be negligible, and do it for over a month and see how you feel. And I think that could be a very good thing. So Randy says, rice cookers. Even though I love my Instant Pot, I'm devoted to my rice cooker, but it's falling apart. I'd like to get one like Chef AJ has with the stainless steel insert, wondering about rice sticking to the bottom and if she's had any workarounds for that. Thank you. Love Chef AJ so much. Do you have a rice cooker, JP?
I use my Instant Pot.
Very good. Yes. And I just to be clear, Randy, my rice cooker is the Aromi rice cooker that is $29 at Costco, and it does not have a stainless steel insert. It actually has a nonstick, which for some people that's problematic. And the only reason I use that instead of my Instant Pot is my Instant Pot has usually got something else in it at the same time.
Well, I will mention that you have to be very careful with anything that has Teflon on it if you have small animals or birds. So I don't recommend these air fryers or rice cookers that are made with Teflon if you have those types of animals. You have to be very cautious because they're toxic to them. It definitely can kill birds. But I've never had any problem making rice. And in the whole rice thing, remember, because of the way that rice absorbs toxins, particularly arsenic, you should be making rice with extra water anyhow, so it shouldn't stick. You should have a big amount of water left over when you're done making rice, because you're going to dump that water out, which is extra arsenic that's already gone out, which is important. And you should pre-soak rice and then rinse it, which helps remove arsenic too.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Okay. Angela says, what kind of exercise can I do with a torn ACL and meniscus? I would say go to a physical therapist and ask, but I'm going to let JP take that one.
Yeah, I mean, definitely you have to talk to your physical therapist or sports medicine doctor, the physician. Either he or she could give you exercises, what you can and can't do. What you can do almost for sure, but of course ask them. You still can work your core. You can still work upper body. And you can work certain, depending on what type of equipment you have, you still can work calves and, soleus muscles and different muscles you can work around it. But you need to check with your physician to see what he or she says you can and can't do. Personally, when I work with clients that have those injuries, I'm working with their physician, but I do a lot of abduction and adduction, so inner thigh and glute stuff, which leaves the knee alone. Hamstring stuff, I do a lot of balance and coordination. I have 3 exercise videos that are out, and they're at Dr. Lori Marvis's site, healthyhumanrevolution.com. The one that may be very beneficial for you is the one that is on balance and coordination. Because oftentimes when you have problems with ACL and things like that, you really have to overcompensate and get really good at balance. So you could check those out.
Great. I just posted a link for healthyhumanrevolution.com and also your email in case anybody wanted to work with you privately, because I know you can often design a routine for people with, challenges.
Sure. You want to work, though, when you have an injury, you just want to work around it. It's like many of you know Shada, who was in a boot when I met her, and we just worked completely around it. We just did everything. She said it was the hardest workout she's ever had. So don't stop working out. Just make sure you go under the directions of your physician.
Great. Okay. I just saw a question first from Susan live, and I want to answer it because I think it's important. I said at first that it would be a good question for Dr. Lyle in a couple of weeks, but I think I might know the answer. It was about the fullness question. And she said, trying to understand how the brain knows it's not satiated, even though the stomach is mechanically full. And I think the answer is because the stretch receptors can be activated, but the calorie receptors may not be activated. I mean, you could JP, didn't you say you used to have model clients that would literally eat cotton?
Oh, well, I mean, models will take cotton balls, soak them in orange juice and eat them all day long because but they're getting that sugar fix and they're getting their fullness factor. But one of the things that people don't realize, we have stretch receptors and nutrient receptors, but also you have pleasure in receptors, right? So you have to realize is that, and I'm not saying this is this particular person's case, but we become pleasure junkies and we just can't get enough pleasure because that's the only place many of us are getting pleasure in our life is from these foods. We don't get it anywhere else. And that's being very imbalanced. You want to have a wide variety of pleasure in your life, not just pleasure coming from food. When I taught my food addiction class in Chicago last year, one of the things I said, and I say this very loosely, let's only have pleasure from food 3 times a day. So we have a morning pleasure, an afternoon pleasure, and an evening pleasure. The rest of your pleasure has to come from your life. So it has to come from loving relationships, volunteer work, music, going outside for walks. You just don't want to have pleasure from one source.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in her question, she said she wants banana ice cream. She didn't say she wants fruit, right? Because when you concentrate it, even though it's the same caloric density, when you freeze it, run it through the machine, it's ice cream, and it's more pleasurable than just she didn't say, well, I have a problem because I want a banana. She wants banana ice cream, the most pleasurable.
Well, right. And the other thing is we have an anchor to ice cream. It's cold, right? It's a certain consistency. It brings us back to when we were a kid and we had ice cream. So we have an anchor to a certain pleasure with that also.
Yep. Terrific. Michael says, I don't feel comfortable returning to my gym right now, even if they're reopening. So I'm thinking of buying a bike. What brand would you recommend? And is it a good overall workout?
Well, that depends on what your goals are. A lot of people use Peloton because they need the motivation and it inspires them. I was just at a client's house today and I told them that their Peloton was not a good choice for them because they have problems with their gait walking, and all they do is sit all day long, and now their exercise is sitting on a bike. Nothing could be worse. So I'd rather have them be on a treadmill. But in general, if you want a bike, the best bike all around is the arm bikes, like a Schwinn Aerodyne bike, or they call it an assault bike. Those are the best conditioning because you are working your legs and then you're working your upper body really well. Now, is it as fun as the Peloton or the ones that have a video screen? No, I don't think they are. They're more hardcore. But in terms of conditioning, and for people, not that I'm teaching this, but are trying to burn calories, they're the most efficient.
The Peloton was very, very expensive, so I bought a Kaiser, and it it seems to be fine. What muscles do we use when we spin, or does it matter if we're sitting or standing?
Yeah. Well, let me mention one thing. When you said that you bought the Kaiser, I've seen your bike before, and your bike is completely fine. The only thing the Peloton really has is the video programming, so you have instructors right there for you. But the problem, the issue with biking is, it's great for your legs and everything, but you're not really getting any upper body work. So imagine half of your body is not getting a workout. And then think about how much balance training are you doing? You're not really doing any, right? It's like the difference between running outside or running on a treadmill. It's more effective to run outside because you have different terrain, so it's training your balance. So there's nothing wrong with bicycling. So I told this client, I said, there's nothing wrong with you biking if you want to strengthen your quadriceps and your legs a little. But from all-around conditioning, I would go with an arm bike.
It would be interesting if somebody could make a bike where you could do both at the same time.
Well, that's what it is. It's an arm bike, so you move your arms and you move your legs at the same time.
Oh, that sounds great, because I'm guilty of what you just said, lower body only. But, it's interesting because when I interviewed the neurologists, the Sherzais, they said, at least in terms of Alzheimer prevention, those are the muscles we really want to have as big as possible, our thigh muscles. That's something how that's.
Yeah, I think for people over 40, you want every muscle as big as possible. Nobody's going to have too big of muscles that's an average person that's not using growth hormones or using steroids or being obsessed in the gym. That's why when people come to me, they say, I don't want to get big muscles, and they're like 55, 60. I was like, you couldn't get big muscles if your life depended on it. And so you do want to get as big of muscles and, more importantly, as strong as muscles as possible when you're over 40, because sarcopenia sets in and you're starting to lose that tissue. And you don't want to be losing muscle tissue, especially in terms of preventing falls, because when you slip, you want to have enough strength in your legs to catch you and prevent you from hitting the ground.
Yep. Great. Cheryl says how to roast sweet potatoes. So I just do it the way Ramses Bravo taught me. I just cut the tips off and I put it in my Breville, not on the air frying setting, on the roasting setting, 400 for 1 hour. And if they're really big, like today, my Hannah yam was 3 pounds. So I had to roast it for 1 hour and 20 minutes. That's how I do it. Do you roast sweet potatoes, JP?
No, I make sweet potatoes in the Instant Pot. That's how I generally, and you can also grate sweet potatoes if you want with a grater. That works really good too. Actually,
that does sound good. Dixie says, does listening to weight loss mindset recordings while sleeping work? I don't know.
So subliminal recordings, they work to a certain degree. It's just like anyone who's getting, like somebody who's getting hypnotized. Some people are more susceptible to it than others. I don't think they can hurt you. But again, when you say weight loss, what's the audio ultimately doing? Hopefully it's just making you more conscientious of what you're putting in your mouth. And a food diary does that very effectively too. And so does mindfulness training, where you're learning to be more mindful of everything you do. But I do think those audio programs, some of them are beneficial because they just make you more sensitive and attuned to things. So I don't think they're bad.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Myra says, are the corn tortillas used in your Mexican lasagna and enchilada strata compliant? So, it depends. I look at things as good, better, best. Corn would, of course, probably be the best because it's a whole grain at 500 calories a pound. Corn tortillas, if they're made out of just corn or corn and lime at 1,100 calories a pound, are they're good, but they're more calorically dense, more than twice. Popcorn at 1,800 calories a pound, not so great for people trying to lose weight. So I would say that in a recipe where you're using them, like instead of a lasagna noodle, they're kind of melt and you're not going to be eating them like you would as chips. So for me, they're okay if they're not a problem for you. I have a motto: when in doubt, leave it out. What do you think about corn tortillas, JP?
Well, I use them a lot for people that I'm just starting with. Same thing, I use wraps or I use nori for them to eat more salads. The only challenge I think with corn is make sure it's non-GMO. You want organic corn because that's one of the highest crops genetically modified. But generally, look at the Aztecs, how long they've been eating corn. And of course, they were eating predominantly whole corn, but I'm sure they made tortillas too.
Absolutely.
I think it only runs into a problem when you start adding to that tortilla things you used to eat, like scoops of guacamole, or peanut butter and jelly, things like that. So you just have to be careful.
Great. Lisa says salt substitutes, which ones are recommended, if any? If you don't need them, you don't have to use them, because I think fresh herbs or dried herbs and spices are the best. But for people that really can't do it without salt, my recommendation is something called Benson's Table Tasty. And there's a bunch of spices at local spicery that may fit the bill as well, depending on your needs and your palate.
Yep, I agree. That's a great one. And just getting used to using new spices and sauces really help too. And again, you're trying to change your palate from something that, I've gone to clients' homes before and their fingers looked like sausages. They were gigantic. And I said, can I just look in your pantry? And all they had was like Campbell's soup. And when you look and it says, let's say it says 15 or 1800 milligrams of sodium, that's for half a can. So they're eating one can with 3,000 milligrams of sodium, and then they're using crackers or bread, which is one of the high sources of sodium. And then whoever else knows, they're eating pickles and everything. So we're so used to having our sodium level so high, then we start reducing it, our palate's not used to it. So you adapt over time.
You have some salt spray, though, for people that are unwilling or unable at the beginning to give up salt that you recommend,
well,
right?
Yeah, it's actually a mineral spray, so it has lots of minerals. It's called Fortis Salt. But it's really just a mineral spray with, magnesium and selenium. But yeah, you're right. It does have sodium in it. So you spray it on your food and it adds a little bit. And that works great. But I just think experimenting with different sauces and different seasonings is the secret. And the Benson's Table Tasty, everyone seems to really like that.
That's great. Lori says, I can't eat tomatoes and recipes use them as a base sometimes. What can I substitute? I don't know. I mean, I don't have a direct substitute for tomatoes in a recipe. I mean, I've seen, if you Google recipes, like I've seen people put beet and carrot if they're making a marinara sauce, but just a one-to-one substitution for tomato, I don't know. Because a lot of times when people can't have tomato, they can't have red bell pepper either because it's a nightshade. That's to me, like when people say I can't have tomato, I can't have banana, I don't have a direct sub. Do you?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough one. So I would say just probably do another recipe rather. I think sometimes when we have these food allergies, intolerances, restrictions, or sensitivities, sometimes it's better just to find a recipe that you like without these in it than try to reinvent the wheel. At least as a chef, that's what I would suggest.
And also remember too, a lot of people who think they have allergies or sensitivities to apples, let's say, or strawberries, when they have an organic apple or organic strawberry, they don't have a reaction. So make sure you're always trying organic because many times it's the pesticide that was added.
Right. Absolutely. Emily says, is organic unsweetened soy yogurt okay, as I prefer my overnight oats creamy rather than using vegan milk? I don't have a problem with soy. I'm allergic to soy. That's why if you look at my recipes, it's not that I'm against it, but I can't make a recipe with something I can't taste. I do know that in general, soy is just much higher in fat. Edamame, for example, over 50% of calories from fat. So if somebody's wanting to lose weight, maybe go with a lower fat milk alternative. Cashew milk is like 25 calories a cup, whereas soy milk, I believe, is like 140, but I don't think soy is bad at all. What about you, JP?
No, I think soy is great. The Asians have been using it for thousands of years. I think you run into a problem when you're using isolated soy protein. That's the problem. And you have to remember too, if researchers are and doing studies on soy, and it's easier for a researcher to buy kilos of isolated soy protein, let's say, than it is to bring in edamame or tempeh or tofu. And all of a sudden they start extrapolating and saying, well, it was soy that caused this issue, like a spike in insulin-like growth factor. Let's be accurate and say there was isolated soy protein. It wasn't tempeh or tofu or miso. So you have to look at these studies very, very carefully. And most people, they don't know any better to look at that. But I think whole organic soy is fine. I use tempeh, I use miso. I think edamame is fine too. I think you run into a problem if you start getting into tofu too much, just because it is so high in fat. And I think if you don't have an issue with fat, you could have more of it, but it becomes very addictive. And let's be honest, tofu itself doesn't taste good. For most people, it's what they add to it that does.
Absolutely. It's sort of like a blank slate. kind of like mushrooms. They don't really have much flavor on their own. It's what you put on them. So
Right.
we have a nice comment from Ellen saying, JP is a wealth of information, wonderful guest. Well, maybe he'll come every month and help me do this because I get tired doing it all by myself. And everyone's asking where to get Hannah yams. So where I live, they have them at Whole Foods. They have them at Sprouts. They have them at the regular grocery store here, which is called Winco, also Ralph's, also Gelson's, and at all the ethnic markets. So I would ask your produce manager to try to carry them, but definitely check the ethnic markets. They have the best produce in those places and cheaper too. Do you have ethnic markets in Colorado, JP?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like to shop at a variety of markets. I mean, I favor farmers markets, and then I like ethnic markets also.
Nice. So this is a recipe question, but I'll let you attack it with the part when you hear about the amount of sugar. Daphne says, I searched for a Chef AJ baked bean recipe and I don't see one. We love them, but we're currently using a half a cup each of maple syrup and brown sugar for 2 pounds of beans. I'd love a good recipe or substitution to make them. So I don't have one, but I bet you somebody does. I mean, there's so many wonderful blogs and YouTube channels, but a cup of sugar, that's a lot. Isn't it, JP, for one recipe?
Yeah, that's a ton. But haven't you used, I thought you made black bean brownies in the past with dates.
I do, but she's actually talking about like a baked beans that you would eat like with a barbecue. I don't have a recipe for that, but it just sounds to me that 1 cup of sweetener is quite a bit.
But why not just experiment with like a date paste?
Yeah, exactly. That's excellent. Instead of maple syrup and instead of brown sugar, it sounds like a great seed. And he's not even a chef, and he knew that. So terrific. Let's see. Kara says, is it okay to eat beans and potatoes or sweet potatoes at the same meal or in combination? I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think it's fine. Again, there's whole issue with starch. These got all these keto programs out there. Just remember that civilizations have been living on starches forever. I mean, if you look at our teeth, you look at the digestive enzymes, amylase in our mouth, I mean, we're designed for starches. Now, where I differ than some of the other practitioners out there, and it's only because of my experience that I've had with clients, I just get a lot of clients that have metabolic issues, hypothyroid and different issues. And I have found some of them cannot eat unlimited starches, 6, 7, 8 potatoes a day and all this rice. They don't often do really well with it. Now, other people do really well. AJ does great with it. She does phenomenal with it. So you have to find what works for you. But remember that a lot of people coming into UWL have metabolic problems. They're 50, 100 pounds overweight, or they've gone on a yo-yo dieting their whole life and they've messed up their system. So they're from an endocrine system. Their endocrine system may not be as healthy as somebody else. So they might not do as well with large volumes of starch. AJ does great. I mean, there's probably not many people that do as well as AJ with large volumes.
And thank goodness. Kirsten says, can you build up a tolerance from some things that you are allergic to, like with gradual desensitization?
Oh, well, yeah. What I do with clients, especially that have sensitivities to foods, what I do is I eliminate them completely for a while. You try to get their immune system really strong and healthy, work on the microbiome in the gut, get that really healthy, and then slowly start introducing a little bit. Say, for instance, beans, 1 or 2 beans, throw it in their salad, right? And then next week, 3 or 4 beans in their salad. And then the next week, 3 or 4 beans of a different type of legume, though. And then that seems to help people because some people can do great. They don't tolerate something now because they've ate so much of it. And then we give them a little, not a real fast, but we stay away from it. And then we slowly start adding it back in. They seem to be able to tolerate it.
Karen, who's watching live, says Dr. Furman has an excellent recipe for baked beans using a 1/4 cup of raisins in the sauce. So that sounds good too. Raisins could work just as well as dates. Okay. Nurma says, I made Chef AJ's apple pie only with peaches and blueberries. And this is just a recipe with oats and dates, fruit and oats. I liked it so much, I ate almost the entire thing for dinner. Is that a problem? Again, without more information, I don't know, because I don't know how much they ate the rest of the, you know what I mean? I can't answer that if it's a problem. If it's not a problem for me, I mean.
Yeah. Well, I think we run into a challenge when we get all these healthy UWL recipes that are kind of like what you're saying, a cookie or thing like that. It's a problem when that's all you're eating and you're not eating enough vegetables.
Yeah. So,
I think that's
Janine, who's watching live, and again, this is my fault because I shouldn't assume that anybody knows who I am, let alone my guests. I jumped right into the Q&A. But Janine says, I'm fairly new. Who is JP and what is his occupation exactly? That would have been a great first question. Thank you, Janine.
So you want me to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
I mean, if I say it, I'd say he's a nutritional guru and celebrity fitness expert, but I'll let him talk about his.
Okay. Well, just so quickly. So I've been vegan for about 38 years and teaching nutrition and fitness and compassion and women's empowerment for, 30, 35 years, let's say. So a long time. And my background's really in geriatrics, enhancing cognitive functioning in seniors. So I created those programs 25 years ago, some of the first in the United States. So basically that's what I do. I have an organization, livingwithharmony.org. So animal sanctuary and a rescue. And we try to do seminars and classes around the country on ahimsa, which is a Sanskrit word for compassion or reverence for all beings. And the celebrity stuff, yeah, I'm known for that, but that's great that I can do that. But I'm more interested in working with people that really need serious help. I'm not into body sculpting. I'm more interested in helping people that are, 150, 200 pounds overweight or have metabolic issues. And that's why AJ and I created the Ultimate Weight Loss, because we knew, even though the name, AJ liked the name, and, I don't use the term weight loss, but it should be ultimate love and compassion, because that's the core of everything I teach is love and compassion.
Right. And Haunted Mansion, if you don't mind asking, says, oh my God, how old are you, JP? That's an impressive resume and you look 30.
Oh, I'm 55.
Wow. So you're you could move into my community now. You're a senior.
I know. And look how great you look, AJ, and you're older than me.
I know. Can you believe it? I can't believe I'm 60.
And you probably could beat me in pickleball.
They just opened up the courts again, by the way. So I'd love to play you. Okay. And let's see. So Dixie says, tell JP to talk about his Losers series starting soon.
Oh, okay. Well, so once the pandemic hit, I started doing some Zoom series to help people deal with the pandemic. So I've done one already just on how to deal with the pandemic emotionally and preparedness and things like that. And then I said, well, I better continue, because look at AJ. She's been doing these great programs once or twice a day free, inspiring and helping so many people. And it's been wonderful. So I thought, well, I'll do one on some of my clients who have been very successful, not just losing weight, but reversing disease. So that's, if you go to johnpierrewellness.com and /winners, you can see about signing up for that. That's coming up, I think, next week, actually.
Okay.
But it's funny because AJ, we teach very similar, but she's kind of the technology queen, and I couldn't be more of a backyard bumpkin when it comes to technology. So all the Zoom stuff and Facebook stuff, I'm just having people volunteer and help me. I'd never be able to do it. It's very confusing.
Okay, so say the link again. I'm going to type it in right now.
www.johnpierre.com/
Yeah,
johnpierrewellness.com /winners.
Forgot the word wellness. Sorry, it takes me a minute to type. Well,
that is not just about weight loss. A lot of people think I'm only talking about weight loss. No, you're going to be learning how people that were in a wheelchair and had 2 strokes and a heart attack and had a blood sugar of 640, how they regained their health and came back to life. So it's not just about weight loss. It's about how people regain their life. I've worked with a lot of people who've had strokes, people who literally could not ambulate or walk or move their arms. And since my background's in geriatrics, I do a lot of neurological and brain stuff with them. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that too. So weight loss is the least important thing. It's getting healthier. Then your weight will come off, your blood pressure will goes down, your moods will change, everything gets better. And that's what I've said in day 1 with Ultimate Weight Loss. Everything gets better, not just losing weight.
Great. And that says, I'm signing on a bit late, so I'm sorry if this question has been asked. I think to obtain maximum weight loss, I have to stop eating nuts and seeds. I just realized I also have to stop eating cashew sauces and nut milk, ?
Well, AJ wrote the book on this. She could never lose weight, right? So you stop doing, what was it?
Yeah, mostly, the high fat plant foods. Yeah, if you haven't read The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss, or you can try the program for a couple of weeks free. But, again, you don't have to say you're going to give them up forever. Try it for a month and see if it makes a difference. If it doesn't, you can always go back to what you were doing.
But you have to remember that, nuts and seeds are the highest calories next to oils. So you could eat a heck of a lot more vegetables and fruits than you can nuts and seeds. So they're very calorie dense, and you have to be careful because it's very difficult to stop eating nuts. Our ancestors had to literally climb trees and crack nuts. That took a long time. They just didn't open up a bag and be able to, start pounding the cashews. I mean, you could finish a whole can or a bag in one movie. Where primitive people, they get a handful of nuts, they might eat one and save the rest for winter, store them.
I don't think people even realize what a nut looks like in nature. And they think of maybe the walnut shell that's about this big, but they don't realize that there's like another like golf ball, then a soft, it's like there's no way our ancestors could have been eating nuts like that. They're just too labor intensive.
Yeah. And look at something like a Brazil nut, the nut, the coating on that, and cashews and all that. Yeah. We're not designed to eat large amounts of them. It's very sparingly. And I use those as sauces. So I use sesame tahini or I add some sesame seeds, but you're just using a small amount, especially if you have issues with weight or, heart disease or diabetes.
Absolutely. And Heidi posts, I'm so glad to hear you don't need to lose weight to work with John Pierre. No, not at all. He works with all kinds of people.
No, I mean, I work with, athletes. As a matter of fact, a lot of my clients are anorexic. So I have tons of people with eating disorder. The last thing we're going to talk about is, as a matter of fact, if you have to lose weight, you and I will probably never talk about losing weight. I just don't talk about it because I'm putting you on a program to get healthier, and you're going to have to lose weight anyhow. The body fat's going to come off eventually, just like your blood pressure is going to come down, and you're going to feel better, digestion, everything gets better.
Right. Melanie says, I saw JP do a video on chopping broccoli and letting it hold for 45 minutes. When I buy the bags of cut up broccoli at Costco, do I need to cut it up again, or is the first cut sufficient to activate the enzyme?
That's a good question. So that has to do with sulforaphane and an enzyme called myrosinase. Here's the secret to it. If you're using frozen vegetables, the thing you need to do is either add some mustard powder, because that has the enzyme. You could add some fresh chopped kale. Make sure you chop it because that has the myrosinase in it. You're not cooking it. Or you could add like a radish in there. And that's enough of the myrosinase to activate the constituents in broccoli that form the anti-cancer compounds. So, you don't need to chop up that frozen one. Just add some mustard powder or some chopped kale.
Great. Okay. Katie says, suggestions on how to handle late afternoon mental fatigue at work. I'm a hospital-based single physician, 4 dogs to care for. As soon as I get home, 60 plus hour unpredictable work week, out of house by 7 a.m., not home till 7 p.m., ride bicycle to work. Any food needs to fit in jersey pockets or small back pair. I do have daycare for my fur kids. Wow, that sounds like a real stressful schedule. So
nice. Yeah, one of the things is, I always recommend is beet boost. So every tablespoon is 40 tart cherries and 4 beets. And that's a great way to perk up. It causes the blood vessels to open up, very similar to Viagra or nitroglycerin. And if you're a physician, you know how that works. So that you take that, you drink that about 45 minutes before you want it the effect. But of course, just using things like essential oils, any of the citrus, the lemon, the orange, there's one called Citrus Bliss, even peppermint, those are a good way to stimulate you. Making sure that you're getting fresh air and you're doing some diaphragmatic breathing, getting as much oxygen as you can and doing some sort of movement is all stimulating to you. And then whatever you're taking on the bike, dried fruit works really good, especially like dates or raisins or apricots and things like that. A lot of ultra endurance runners actually take sweet potatoes with them. Yeah. Dr. Ruth Heydrich used to use sweet potatoes.
I'm going to be interviewing her very soon on the show. So
amazing. What a legend. I taught in Hawaii. She invited me and I couldn't believe it. I mean, she's got to be like 80 and she looks like she's 40 and she still could outrun anyone. Amazing. So yeah, hopefully that will help. That Beet Boost is really good. It's beetboost.com is the site, and then use code JP16. That'll give you a discount and then I think free shipping. Yeah, we don't sell anything at our Sanctuary site, but those are affiliate links, and then our Sanctuary just gets some sort of money back.
Nice. Nadesh says, good to know. She didn't know about adding a radish. It's funny. I don't like radishes exactly, but if I use my mandolin and I slice them thin, then I like them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very peppery. Steph says,
a very good question on the broccoli, though. Frozen broccoli. It's a great question. So.
Steph says, can you recommend any mindful living eating resources?
Yeah. Actually, on the last. If you just email me at Foods for Life JP at Yahoo, we have a therapist that we work with, in our program that does mindfulness programs, and you can do a consult that way. Lots of different books on mindfulness. There's a ton of them. But in my last Zoom series, we did a whole session on mindful eating. And if Teresa Passy is watching, maybe she could post that link. But you know what? I will have to say this. In all the years that I've taught, especially with people who have food addictions, the one thing I think is the biggest common denominator is most people are not eating mindfully. As a matter of fact, most people today don't do anything mindfully at all. But one of the things I stress is, since I know that you're eating at least 3 times a day and snacks maybe 5, if you could practice adding mindfulness in at those times, that's the greatest thing that you can do, because you don't have to sit in meditation for 20 or 30 minutes. You just be mindful during that meal, or even when you're chopping your vegetable or putting your fork into a mango, you're being conscious of it. Many people are just eating unconsciously.
Right. Julia says, where do I get the mandolin? There's one on my Amazon store, but I like the Speedy Baby Mando, and that's from Tupperware. And if you go to my Facebook page, you can see how to order that if you like. Let's see, there's a question from Ellen. Do you, JP, work with diabetics 1.5 who need to gain weight?
Oh, sure, yeah. But I also work with Dr. Lori Marbus, who's a physician. So if you have medical questions, she can answer those. But yeah, of course, I work with diabetics all the time. Nice. And remember, there's only 2 types of weight you're going to gain. You're either going to gain fat or you're going to gain muscle. So some people legitimately do have to gain some fat, but you do really want to work on building muscle for sure.
Great. Okay. So JP, we've got a bunch of questions on grains and flour. So I'm just going to read all 4 of them because I think they're all very similar. Okay. So and then we can talk about it together. So the first one is from Lisa. Are ground rolled oats forbidden? And then Yelena says, does sophistry mean we are to stay away from any flour or just whole wheat flour? And then Memento says, are flours ground from chickpeas, millet, almond considered compliant? If we do them ourselves in moderation, is it a bad idea if it's not a trigger? And then the last question on flour from Andrea is, I'd like to know what to recommend instead of using ground oat flour in a recipe like barbecue cauliflower rings that need a coating. I saw the question about grinding oats and wanted to ask this because I made these for the 4th of July and couldn't figure out a way to bread the cauliflower without grinding oats into a coarse flour. Of course, I can make them without breading, but I'm curious what the answer would be. I'm at my goal weight and ground oats aren't a trigger for me, especially when in small amounts. So basically kind of like the same question, just asked in a different way.
Well, you know, the challenge with is anytime you take a grain and you open up the surface area, you create more surface area. So it's not going to be a timed release. It's almost like eating whole grains are like a log on a fire, and they're time release burning slowly their carbohydrate. As soon as you grind them, it's like taking a piece of paper and putting it on a fire. Poof, that energy is gone. So we want to eat as much whole grains as we can and avoid, for sure, AJ, if you remember in UWL, somebody was arguing with us forever about rice cakes. And they were saying rice cakes were so healthy for you. And we said, well, we understand they're brown rice, but when they're puffed like that, they have a different glycemic index and they make you crave carbohydrates even more. So in general, we don't recommend flours, but if you don't have an issue with weight or blood sugar issues, having like a garbanzo bean pasta, which I've had before, is not that big of a deal. And if you do have a flour, make sure you have a lot of vegetables with it. So if you had a flour tortilla, you'd want to have a lot of vegetables and legumes like beans in there, because that fiber will help bind to those carbohydrates and release it a little bit more slowly.
Right. Thank you. And I think this is where people are going to be individuals. And that's why you can't really paint everybody with the same brush if they have food addictions, because some people are going to be more or less vulnerable. And like, I know for me, I don't eat flour or things like that. But if I have a little bit of millet flour in a recipe that I'm using it because I want a certain texture, not because it's flour, but when you just cook with oats and don't grind them, they tend to be gummy. It's not really a trigger for me, but for other people, they've been told that it really sets them off and they just, like you say, eat the whole pie. So this is where I think people have to take the responsibility to know themselves and what their triggers are. But as an overall rule, I just say, when in doubt, leave it out. Here's the best 32 grinders right here, our teeth. So, the more you eat your food whole, probably the better. And also it increases caloric density when you grind it too. That's what people don't realize is when you have, brown rice, it's 500 calories a pound and it will fit your stomach, which is about the size of a cantaloupe, holds about a liter of food, which is a little over 4 cups. You grind brown rice into a flour, now you need 3 pounds to fill the same space in the tank. So again, you can't defy the laws of calorie density. So that's just something to consider. My preference is to eat the oat as whole as possible and not to even eat rolled oats, to eat the oat groat. But I know everybody's not going to do it. It's not that oats are a horrible food. It's just that, for some people, it's too much processing. And I remember when I interviewed Robbie and Cyrus from Mastering Diabetes, they talked about, especially people that are diabetic, they don't often do well when you're eating even rolled oats or especially grinding them. So again, Annette's saying, when in doubt, leave it out, the best advice ever. And Annette, that implies with people in your life too that are toxic, not just foods. Yep. Okay. So let's see. There was a question about working with you, JP. Florence said, is it only in person or do you work with people online?
Oh, most of my stuff is online, right? FaceTime or on the phone. Mm-hmm.
And Janelle says, where is your sanctuary? And when things open up, can we visit?
Yeah, so we're in Colorado and we're actually looking to get a property now. We have 20 animals right now, but we're trying to get a large, 5 to 10 acre in Boulder, the Boulder area. So yeah, just go to livingwithharmony.org and that's our information. And actually the website's being redone, but it's still up now, but it'll be all revamped in a couple of weeks.
Great. I'll type that in just a moment after I answer Ellen's question. Are oat groats better than steel cut and rolled oats? In my opinion, yes. And I actually have a whole video on YouTube where I talk about the hierarchy of grains. Like, that from Brenda Davis, right, JP?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think, though, it's an individual thing. If you're out at a hotel and all they have is, flapjacks and cereal, but they do have instant oatmeal. Yeah, instant oatmeal is not as good, of course, but I'd rather have somebody eat instant oatmeal, than flapjacks or, Cocoa Puffs.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's see if I can. Okay. Susan, this is about those few of us who cannot lose weight despite being compliant. I've been doing whole food, plant-based, no oil McDougall for 1.5 years and not losing any. At times I switch up to around 75% raw vegetable salad and less starch. I know AJ and Dr. Lyle and others say it's impossible and I must be cheating. I have to count calories and be under 900 pounds to lose it all. I've been on a medically supervised diet the last 2 months with 800 calories a day. And I'm still only losing 1 pound every 2 weeks. I walk 30 minutes to an hour a day. I started changing back to this plan and began gaining again. Help, not a thyroid issue, according to the doctor.
Well, again, you're weighing. So I don't know what you're weighing. I don't know what you're losing and what you're gaining. I have no idea at all. And two, I think Dr. Goldhammer said it best. If you show him somebody who can't lose weight, it's somebody who's not generally eating enough plant matter. But in your case, you're saying you are. And I just wonder if not that we utilize exercise as a way to burn calories, it's mainly get healthier. But of course, it is an effective means. So if it's possible to bump up your exercise a little bit, that might help too. And of course, adding muscle. The more muscle you add on, it's metabolically active. So it's eating calories throughout the day. And then we have something called NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which just means how much are you moving throughout the day between exercise. I've had a lot of clients that were working out with me regularly and they were moving throughout the day. And as soon as COVID hit, they weren't moving at all and they started gaining weight. So really the only thing that changed was that NEAT, that non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So be conscientious of how much you're moving, put a pedometer on and see, are you getting that 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day? That would be a start. And the other thing that I do, and this is where AJ and I love that AJ and I don't agree on everything, which is good. It's a good sign. But one thing I use for my clients, not just for weight loss, it's not even the main reason, is a fruit and vegetable day. And I do that as long as somebody doesn't have an eating disorder. I do that to instill a certain sense of discipline in them and also to give them a lower calorie day and also to find out if they have food allergies, because many of those food allergies are coming from protein sources. So if they're just eating fruits and vegetables, it's not as high in protein as some of the other foods. So that might be something to experiment with also.
Right. And the thing is I've never seen anybody actually go to the True North Health Center and not figure this out and lose weight. She mentions she's doing whole food, plant-based, no oil, but she doesn't mention if there's any sugar or alcohol or flour or salt in the diet. And I know that some people that until they get rid of everything, like the last bit of salt and the last bit of caffeine, they don't lose weight and so I need to see more of a picture from Susan to see what she's seeing, what she's experiencing. Because I know talked to Dr. Alvarez just the other day, and she talked about how salt contributes to people eating 11% of more calories. And so I'd like to know, when you say you're compliant, whose program are you compliant on? Because in ultimate weight loss, it's not just no oil, it's no sugar, oil, flour, alcohol, salt, and also caffeine. So I'd like to know a little bit more. And I don't know if you're watching live, Susan, but
yeah. Now, I've never had a client in all the years I've worked that hasn't been able, and not that I measure it, but they know from their physician, and I can tell by looking at them. I've never had a client that can't lose weight, because the truth of the matter is, it's like if a celebrity comes to me and says, I have X amount of months to lose weight, the first thing I say to that celebrity is, how much can you suffer? And what I mean by that, in their brain, restricting calories, and also how much movement can they add in. And of course, if you're earning whatever X amount of $1 million per movie, you're willing to suffer a little bit more. But other people, it's their life depends on it, so they're willing to suffer. But it really comes down to people having to change their mindset. I don't know in your particular case, but for many people, they think like the way AJ and I eat is very restrictive and boring, and it's not a way they'd like to eat. Well, that's one of the reasons that makes them fail, is because they're going from driving 70 miles an hour on the expressway. Now they're going on a side street and they're doing 40 and they feel slow when they should be doing 20. You just have been at such an extreme here that when you come down to what your palate should really be like, it seems like it's not as fun to you. And again, I think too many people are having all their fun in their kitchen when they should be having fun all around.
It's interesting to me because, people are saying, well, I'm not, I need motivation. I need motivation. And yet, we see, and you've worked with some of these celebrities, like, for example, Joaquin Phoenix, who was not overweight, but then they have to lose extraordinary amounts of weight for a role, or Natalie Portman, or the South African actor, Charlize Theron, who actually, sometimes they actually have to gain weight. They're being paid a lot of money to do this. And I'm sure that, like, in their regular life, they don't want to be that thin or that heavy. But what I'm trying to say is when there's what leverage, or they can do it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, like I said, and it's weird in Hollywood because I've been at photo shoots before, and a model will come walking right toward me and looks literally like a biology skeleton. That's how skinny they look. And they'll sit down and they'll start chain smoking, and they'll say the photographer thinks I should lose an extra 10 pounds. And it's like, are you kidding me? It's like we have such a warped view of what health is. And, that's why I'm saying you can't go on, even the sizes on your shirts and your pants. Women are terrified when they see, that they're in a large, but if they would go into another company, they're wearing a medium. Do you know what I mean? It's just crazy. You want to try to be healthy, and I don't know how much weight this individual needs to lose, but there's a lot of people out there that you've seen and I've seen, AJ, that really don't really need to lose weight, but they think they need to lose weight.
Right. And also people have different body types. Some are curvy, some are straight up and down. And that's why we shouldn't shame or criticize anybody. Like, people are always telling me I'm too thin and I'm anorexic and whatever, but they don't know me. They don't know how tiny my bones and wrists really are. How can you make that judgment? It's so bizarre. And that's one reason I'm glad I'm out of LA. I remember this one client came to me, was doing, consulting in my house, thinner than me, model, actress. And she says, the director said, I have to lose 5 pounds because when I turn my head, the camera angle, and I'm like, I was like pulling my hair out. It's like, this is, this is just insane. So I'm glad I'm not in that eating disordered world anymore, because it's not healthy. Gunther says, what does JP think of using a little Himalayan salt to hydrate tissues and remove toxins from the body?
Yeah, no, I don't. I think it's interesting when people start selling all these different salts. It's basically sodium, and they'll call it Himalayan salt. And then after a while, a couple months later, it's pink Himalayan salt, right? And then it's pink Himalayan salt blessed by the monks. So no, I think that if you want to increase your sodium content, you should have more chard, you should have more celery in your diet if you're wanting to increase it. But no, I don't think you need to use pink Himalayan salt for anything. Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Marilyn says, what happens after the 14-day sugar challenge? Need directives? Do we still get daily emails? Anybody been doing this a long time? I just want to address this idea of challenges in general. They're like experiments, but it doesn't mean that when it's over, you're supposed to go back to doing whatever you were doing before. You know what I mean? It's, it's like when people do a cleanse, for example,
Yeah.
What do you think of this idea about people? Because to me,
Well,
that it's like going on a diet, you go off a diet, you know?
yeah, I think any challenge people do, and I get calls all the time that somebody's doing this challenge and that challenge. And it's like, I'll have somebody that went off their program do a fruit vegetable day. It's just to reset them. These challenges are great because they reset you. But once the 2 weeks is over, guess what? You better have another program you're going to do, because you can't just go back to the way you used to be. So all challenges and 2 week programs, I think they're all great to reset you, but you better be able to stay on the straight and narrow after that. It's kind of like going to True North after you're done fasting. You don't get to get out of the fast and go home and eat hot dogs and ice cream.
Yet people do. People do. Like I've literally heard of people that go there and they fast and on the drive home stop for fast food. I have heard of people doing that.
Well, then usually those people many times are just going to lose some weight, I guess.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. It's not healthy for you to do it that way.
I have seen people at True North. There's a store right across the street. You know, they don't lock you up literally, that go to that store. And I've seen them eating chicken and ribs. I mean, it's crazy. You know, they're paying this money. I remember, I believe it was it Hans Deal, who used to work at the Pritikin Center, where people were paying, I don't know if it was 10,000 a week or a month, and people would leave and go to McDonald's.
Wow. Yeah. Well,
It's crazy, huh? Yeah, that's how you know it's an addiction. Bethany says, how do you get over the longing for certain foods? And are there any foods you still miss?
well, I'll let you answer that one, because you came from food addiction.
Yeah, I mean, so the longing, you know, longing is an interesting word because you didn't say craving or addiction. I think that if there's an emotional memory tied to a food, you may not get over it completely. And by that, I mean, like, for example, I've been vegan for 43 years, but every time I go to San Francisco, I walk by a place called Tadish Grill, where when I was 14, I had Manhattan clam chowder and the famous sourdough bread. And it was literally the last time I saw my dad before he left. And so when I'm there, I'm like, God, I wish I could have that meal. But it's not because I want to eat clams or eat bread. It's because I wish I could have seen my dad growing up. You see what I mean? So the longing, that's different than like the actual biological or physiological craving that you have when you're addicted to sugar and flour and alcohol. So I don't know if you ever get over it if your memories are tied to specific foods, like, for example, that one is. Are there any foods I still miss? Not really, but every now and then I get a hankering for black licorice. And I don't mean like Twizzlers, the all waxy kind, like the European kind that really like kind of stuck in your teeth. And so what I do when that happens is I make a fennel salad that was this week's Weight Loss Wednesday, and I'm good to go. I'm sure you don't have any food memories, right, JP?
Well, no, I guess I was like any other kid. I ate candy and all that stuff, and I mean ice cream. But like if I wanted ice cream, I would just take, frozen fruit and put it in a blender and turn it into like a whipped, like a sorbet. That would be fine. And I like dates, so I use dates, and I could put a nut in there, or some nut butter if I wanted. So I think you just neuro adapt after a while. So I think you just kind of just neuro adapt, and that's it.
Nice.
It just takes time though.
I'm asking people if they'd like you back, because I'll tell you, it was a lot easier with your help to answer these questions. Because when it's just me, I kind of get sick of hearing myself talk. So if you'd like to come back, we got a whole group of people that are saying.
It's because when they say it's just me on, I don't get any questions.
And when it's just
one question.
And when it's just me, I get too many. So this might be a perfect balance. If you have time to do this with me once a month, I would appreciate it. So we have time for one more question. And this is a very interesting one I just saw it from Julie. Hello, AJ and JP. How does AJ inspire you, JP? And how does AJ inspire you, JP, and AJ? Well, I guess you know what the question is. How do you inspire me? How do I inspire you? Well, JP really mostly inspires me to be a better person, because he is really the most, like, if you were to open up the dictionary and look up compassion, love, you'd see Mother Teresa, JP, and that's basically it. And so he sets the bar very, very high. And little things like bugs that, it's not that I would ever intentionally hurt a bug, but I don't really like them too much, especially like cockroaches. I get a little scared of cockroaches and spiders. I'm not scared of Spider-Man. But he taught me that you can take a jar and you can then crawl in and you can relocate them. And also, if it wasn't for JP, I wouldn't have my dog Bailey right here, who we just celebrated our 5th anniversary, because he called me on July 1st, 2015, when I was at the animal shelter, and he just happened to call. Didn't know I was at the animal shelter. He goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "Well, we're at the shelter. I saw this 3-week-old puppy named Darby, a Maltipoo." And he goes, "You take the oldest dog there. And we did. And it's like the best dog we ever had. So that's how JP inspires me.
Well, thank you. So AJ, one of the things that people don't realize is, even though she can be very tough, she's super, super sensitive. And that's why you can't send her any videos or anything to do with animals, because she's hypersensitive. And I think one of the biggest contributions she's made, and I've always told her this, is as a pioneer in our field, as a chef and a comedian, and getting out good information. And a good majority of all this stuff she's doing for free. Like you're producing 1 to 2 videos a day now, right? Interviews, AJ?
I know. I've done 150. I didn't know it was going to happen, but what happened is people liked it and they keep writing. And then I keep thinking, I said, I'm only going to do it till the end of April. And then I was going to only do it to the end of May and then the end of June. But what happens, if you get an email from a famous doctor saying, can I be on the show? Then you just keep going. So as long as there's people that want to watch and that want to be guests, I'm going to just keep doing it.
Well, I think that's amazing. And I really admire that. And the other thing I admire is that AJ and I both didn't understand technology for sure. When we met, neither of us did. And she would always try to encourage me to say, hey, JP, I'm taking this class on technology. So she's kind of, in my mind, she's like a technology whiz. And she did it all on her own, with just trying to study and do it on her own. I haven't done any of that at all. And I give her credit because she's taken all that knowledge and she's helping so many people. So I think it's amazing, AJ, how many people you're reaching. And all these programs that you're doing for free, bless you, because they're helping a lot of people. So,
well, I'm enjoying it, especially when I get people like you coming and visiting like this. So, guys, if we didn't answer your question, I think I'm going to be able to get him to come back. I think once a month is enough because we already do a show every day. And you can always work with him privately. Foods for Life JP is his email. He's fantastic, especially if you have some orthopedic things and you need to know what to do in that area, or just if you want to just have love and compassion in your life. He is the best. So thank you guys so much for being here. Come back tomorrow at 11 a.m. when I have Steve Middleman and Mark Schiff, 2 very well-known comedians that are vegan, that have been able to maintain not only a vegan diet, but a daily exercise regime despite being on the road pretty much their entire lives. So you won't want to miss that one. Well, it's great to see you again, JP. Thanks so much for all you do for the animals, the planet, and people.
You too. Thank you. And thanks everybody for being here. We'll see you again.
Yeah. You and I are both Hall of Famers, vegan Hall of Famers.
Yep.
Absolutely. But you got yours first. Okay. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye.